Conference Championship weekend of the 2021 college football season is over, and today, as we head into bowl season, I'll be giving you guys my updated college football rankings. And it is safe to say this has been an insane college football season, and we're only headed into the best part of the year, and that is bowl season. We've got some excellent bowl games. The New Year's Six looks great. Plus, we've got an excellent college football playoff. We got two new teams in there, being Michigan and Cincinnati, plus the two SEC powers being Georgia and Alabama. Going to be a fun college football playoff and a fun postseason. With that said, today I'll be giving you guys my updated rankings, and these will be lasting us all the way through the national championship. So let's go ahead and get into it. Here's our 1 through 7, and obviously these will look different than how the college football playoff rankings look. Obviously, these are my personal rankings. So if I were to pick the college football playoff, this is how I would line it up. Michigan is my number 1. They beat Iowa 42-3, looked phenomenal in that game, and their past 3 games, they've just looked the best team in the nation, I would say. I mean, if you look at them, they beat Ohio State, finally beat the Buckeyes. That was a huge win for this program, finally being able to beat the Buckeyes. And, I mean, there were a few question marks as to how this team would look and how they would handle the pressure of being in a pretty much playoff playing game there in the Big Ten title game against Iowa, which the Hawkeyes are a good football team, but obviously offensively they couldn't get nothing going on Saturday night in Michigan. I mean, that's in part against, if you look at Michigan's defense, they played phenomenal against Iowa. They held Ohio State, and Michigan is a very good football team, and they're deserving of being the number 1 team in the nation right now. They're 12-1, moving up 1 position after that win. So I did have them at number 2 last week, but obviously with Georgia losing, I do have Michigan jumping them and getting up to number 1. And Alabama, you can make a strong argument that the Crimson Tide should be number 1 as well, and I totally support putting Alabama at number 1. Like, I'm not opposed to it in any way. The way that Alabama played against Georgia was phenomenal, and you can't go against Nick Saban. I mean, it's just insane what he's been able to do with Alabama, and obviously Bryce Young has had a fantastic year for Alabama, and the Crimson Tide are a very dangerous football team here in the college football playoff. I've got them at number 2. Beat Georgia, obviously, 41-24. 12-1 is their record, and they do have that one loss to Texas A&M back in the middle of this season. But Alabama, with Nick Saban and Bryce Young, you cannot go against this football team. Alabama, wouldn't be surprised one bit to see them win yet another national title. On the flip side, you got Georgia lost to Alabama 24-41, moving down 2 positions, obviously, from that loss, and they're 12-1. First loss of the season for the Bulldogs came in that SEC title game. Kind of shocking seeing Georgia losing that game as they were. They were down for a long time in that game. Once Alabama gained control, they just took that game right away from Georgia. But Bulldogs, there's a weak argument going around that Georgia shouldn't even be in the college football playoff, and I totally disagree with that. If you look at Georgia all season long, they've been the most dominant team in the nation all season. If you look at, the first game that comes to mind is that Arkansas game. They've played some excellent games all season, but especially that Arkansas matchup, huge game going in. Arkansas was on fire. You had Georgia and Arkansas going head-to-head, and Georgia beat them 37-0. The Bulldogs were phenomenal in that game, and that's been kind of the common theme for them all season is how dominant they've been. They might not have the strongest strength of schedule in the nation, but Georgia's been phenomenal all season long, and they're very much deserving of being the college football playoff. And they're also a team that I'd really watch out for. Michigan, Alabama, Georgia, I could see all 3 of those teams especially winning the college football playoff. Cincinnati is also a very good football team, don't get me wrong, but I just can't imagine them beating Alabama and Michigan or Georgia in 2 straight games in the college football playoff. But huge credit to Cincinnati. The Bearcats, phenomenal football team. They're 13-0, and it is huge for the group of 5 teams. Seeing Cincinnati, a group of 5 team in the playoff, 13-0. Nothing against the Bearcats. I totally respect that football team. They've done an excellent, they've had a phenomenal year, being 13-0, and I've got them moving up 1 position up to number 4. Cincinnati, they've had a great year. Huge credit to them. Desmond Ridder, that is huge for them to get to the college football playoff, and they've got a huge opportunity. They're in the playoff to potentially win a national championship. So, they got Alabama, which, going up against Nick Saban is a tough matchup for Cincinnati right now, and best of luck to them, but I just don't think that Cincinnati's got a very high chance of winning the national title. But it's a huge accomplishment, no doubt, getting to the college football playoff. And, once again, huge credit to that entire football team and Luke Fickell. Notre Dame is my number 5. Obviously did not play as they're not in a conference, so they did not play in a conference title, but they're 11-1. And, if Michigan would have lost, if they would have lost to Iowa, we would see Notre Dame in the playoff right now. So obviously it was pretty close for them. And you can make an argument for Baylor. Potentially, they had a chance. I mean, they kept their chances alive after beating Oklahoma State 21-16. I've got them to number 6, and that kind of shows. I mean, the committee actually ranked Baylor at number 7, and they put Ohio State at number 6. So Baylor, even though they beat Oklahoma State in the Big 12 title, they would have had no chance at making the college football playoff if Michigan and, say, Alabama did lose. I mean, the one scenario that Baylor had at getting into the college football playoff was obviously Michigan losing, Georgia beating Alabama, and the committee knocking out the Crimson Tide. So you'd have like Michigan, Georgia, Cincinnati losing to Houston, then you'd have Notre Dame and then Baylor in that 4th spot. So the chances were incredibly low of that happening, but I mean, it was still possible. But obviously, those odds were defied by the committee ranking Ohio State, so Ohio State would have had the advantage anyway. But yeah, so Baylor, they beat Oklahoma State 21-16. That was a huge win for the Bears. Huge credit to them as well. They've had an excellent season. I would say that you got Michigan, who's a huge surprise team as well, but I'd say Baylor potentially is my surprise team of the year. 11-2, they're a young football team. I did not expect Baylor to be anywhere near 11 wins at this point. I expected Baylor to be, I'm going to be honest, I expected them, as many others, by the way, to only get up to 6 or 7 wins. I mean, I thought Baylor was going to be kind of on the gradient of making a bowl game, but yeah, huge credit to them. They've had a great season. Ohio State's my number 7, staying in that same position. They are 10-2. The Buckeyes, obviously a good football team, and they are playing Utah in the Rose Bowl. Huge respect to Ohio State, though, and they've had a great year as well once again. Moving on to 8-14, Ole Miss did not play, but they're 10-2. Huge credit to Ole Miss as well. They've been a surprise team. Matt Corral, I expected them to be good this season. I figured Ole Miss would be around 8 to 10 wins or so. Matt Corral obviously is a great quarterback, and yeah, they've had a great year. Oklahoma State's my number 9. They lost to Baylor 16-21. All college football playoff hopes went down the drain with that loss there, and they were just inches away. That final play when they were rushing for the end zone, it's a heartbreaker, that's for sure, for the Cowboys. I mean, being that close to the college football playoff. They're 11-2 though, and they've had an excellent season, and looking forward to seeing how they do in their bowl game. I believe they got Notre Dame. Should be a fun one there. Michigan State's my number 10, staying in that same position. They're 10-2. Spartans have also had, this has been an incredible 2021 season, and the fact that we've seen some very unlikely teams have some great seasons. Like Michigan State, did not expect them to be as good as they were either. Baylor, Michigan State, Oklahoma State, I expected them to be good. Ole Miss, kind of them too. Utah's been a surprise team. They've had a great year. Pittsburgh as well, you could argue. BYU. So we've seen several teams that were not expected to be very good football teams that are currently in the top 15. So yeah, it's been an incredible season. Utah beat Oregon 38-10. Wasn't too sure whether Utah would beat Oregon or not. Obviously playing a football team the second time, it is kind of questionable. Especially after Utah destroyed Oregon in their first matchup in the regular season. But Utah's 10-3, headed to the Rose Bowl. Huge credit to Utah as well. The Utes have had a great year. Very talented football team there. And Oregon, obviously, I think the rumors about Mario Cristobal, their head coach, going to Miami, I think that really affected Oregon, if you ask me. It was more than just a physical thing. For Oregon to go into that football game, 2 weeks before they lost to them like 38-7, and then you go into that football game in the Pac-12 title, and Oregon just comes out completely flat. Utah runs all over them again. It was extremely similar to how it was a few weeks ago. Which is that was very unexpected. If Oregon's playing at their full potential, they should have kept that game close. But I think the head coaching rumors definitely had an impact on Oregon, if you ask me. It was more than just a physical thing. It was a mental thing for Oregon. Oklahoma's my number 12, staying in the same position. Or actually, I think I've got them moving down 2. Putting ahead, that would be Utah, I think. So Oklahoma, they're 10-2. They've had a great year as well. And obviously, Oklahoma it was a little bit of obviously losing to Oklahoma State was a terrible loss, and losing to Baylor as well. So they were knocked out of the Big 12 picture, but still, good year for the Sooners. Should be interesting to see how they do in their bowl game. Pittsburgh, ACC champion, beat Wake Forest 45-21. Figured Pittsburgh would win that game. They're the more talented football team there, and also I'd say the more consistent team. Wake Forest, I thought that they were undefeated for a long time, but I was always kind of skeptical about the Demon Deacons. They hadn't really played a very strong schedule, and once, of course, they took their first loss, it kind of fell apart from there. But yeah, so Pittsburgh, huge credit to them, ACC champions. BYU's my number 14, moving down 1 position. did not play a game this past weekend. They're 10-2. Moving on to 15 through 21, Clemson. That is a football team that has improved drastically over the course of the season. And, I mean, certainly Clemson to start out the year looked like a pretty terrible football team. Many people questioned whether they'd even get to a bowl game. But they've improved a lot. They're 9-3. I would argue that they're one of the better teams in the ACC now. I mean, they would compete right up next to Pittsburgh to win that ACC. I mean, if, for example, we saw Pittsburgh and Clemson in the ACC title game, which is not possible because obviously Pittsburgh was. But anyway, yeah, if Clemson played Pittsburgh, I'd probably say Clemson would they probably would win right now just based off of like the Tigers. They've improved so much over the course of the season. They're playing some excellent football right now, and it'll be fun to see how they do against Iowa State in their bowl game. NC State's my number 16. They're 9-3 as well. Did not play this past weekend. Oregon, number 17, lost to Utah 10-38. I'm going to move them down 6 positions after that loss. I kind of considered moving them down below Kentucky and Louisiana and maybe even Texas A&M as well. But I think Oregon, I mean, they're still a very good football team. They've got the talent of being a college football playoff team, but obviously a few mental issues, I think, caused them the game against Utah there. But they're 10-3, still a good year for Oregon. Kentucky's my number 18. Did not play this past weekend. Moving up 1 position there, and they're 9-3. Kentucky, I mean, I think they're ranked like 24 or 25 in the college football playoff rankings. They should be a bit higher than that. I like the Wildcats as a football team. They're very talented, should be up at least in the top 20 if you ask me. Louisiana entering the rankings this week. They beat Appalachian State 24-16. They're 12-1, have had a great year. Number 20 is Texas A&M, and of course you got 21 being Wisconsin. Your 2 best 4-loss teams in the nation right now, if you ask me. Wisconsin, I've got them ranked. I don't think any other poll has them ranked. Texas A&M is, I think, very low in a couple of them, but I do have them a bit higher, mainly because I just think Texas A&M and Wisconsin, I'm more confident in those 2 teams than I am with the teams below them. So I do have them moving up this past week, and it'll be fun to see how they do in the postseason as well. Moving on to 22 through 25, Iowa, I don't know about the Hawkeyes. I mean, the way they lost against Michigan, that offense could not do anything. I mean, they tried out 2 quarterbacks. Both quarterbacks had terrible games, and they only scored 3 points. So for Iowa, I mean, that's a football team that defensively and special teams wise have got a team that could easily win the Big Ten. But their offense that's what's kept them back all season long. If you look at their games against Wisconsin and Purdue, their offense just couldn't get anything going in both of those games. And, I mean, their defense did allow some points. But, I mean, yeah, Iowa's defense and special teams are what can get them wins. And their offense was just terrible this season, and that's what ended up costing them a chance at the college football playoff. I mean, defense and special teams, both of those units could get them to the college football playoff, but offensively just couldn't. But they're 10-3. I've got them at 22, much lower than the college football playoff rankings do just because of their offense. Arkansas is number 23. They did not play this past weekend. They're 8-4. UTSA enters back in the rankings after beating Western Kentucky. They're 12-1. I mean, they should be ranked. They're a conference champion, 12-1. And so I do believe they should be ranked, even though I'm putting them pretty low. And then Houston, I've got them at 25, dropping them 7 positions. I don't really want to drop Houston that far, but I wanted to keep UTSA and Arkansas, Iowa, etc. above them. So I've got Houston at 25, 11-2. Lost to Cincinnati by 15. First 5 out, Utah State. They should be. I mean, I really wanted to put them in the top 25. The way that they played against San Diego State, they should be. But Utah State, I've got them as the first one out. Wake Forest to 27. Once again, Wake Forest, the way that they've played in their bigger games, it's been a little bit concerning. So Wake Forest, I've got them out of the rankings. Minnesota 28, San Diego State 29, and Purdue at number 30. Dropped out, number 20 was Wake Forest last week. They're dropping out, and San Diego State was 24. Anyway, that being said, that wraps it up for our bowl season rankings. I'll be doing a final rankings after bowl season is over in middle January. So that being said, that's it for now. Appreciate you guys all watching as always. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And yeah, so stay tuned for more from All Sports Central. See you guys all later.